Hey Terry,
Hi
how's it
there, how
going?
you doing?
Can't complain.
Good. Well,
So,
welcome to our first official.
first official Asia Pacific, although it's a weird, it's in the middle of your days at 11 a.m. there. Is that right? Did I?
Yeah, but obviously it spans a lot of different time zones, so hopefully everyone will be able to fit into this one. Um,
Hmm.
some basic housekeeping. These sessions are automatically recorded and get published as part of the CDF process. So uh, we're always able to refer back to them, and they're publicly available.
And so how should we set up the calendar thing after this? Were you waiting for something, or can it go on? Like, so Animesh was implying that it could go on kind of anyone's calendar. Is that true?
So the challenge is that the way we've been doing it to date with these meetings is that we've been using Zoom to actually publish the events on their calendar.
Right.
So that that was set up with the wrong time on it when the meeting was configured last week. So we either need to change that, or we need to create a public calendar that can be shared. Because with the Google Calendar, the you share the whole calendar rather than a specific event.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, when I think of a personal calendar, it's like you invite people and you can let them manage it and invite other people, but that's not the same as having an open event.
Yeah.
So who does that? Like who sets up the Zoom link?
Dan set that up for me, Dan Lopez.
All right. So he'll probably get to it sometime. I'm just taking some notes. So as for times of the meeting, is your preference to do it like sort of back to back with the other time?
Yeah, it would. My concern is that what we really need to be focusing on now with the roadmap is um, getting people collaboratively working through filling out the gaps in the document. And then for each of those, we should be reviewing them and getting some consensus, and then sort of signing off each change. So it's much easier if we can do that on the same cadence, so everyone's working on the same bit of the document.
So they might be different people though, right? Like it could be like would you go to both normally
Yeah,
as
so I'll attend both meetings.
right? That's a bit of a
Um,
load on you. Is that okay?
yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, somebody's going to have to chair this and drive it forwards. So that's not a problem. Um, and obviously, the first thing that we need to do really is to focus on how we get more engagement, and get people actively contributing to the document, because there seems to be a very strong interest in the outcome of the document. So we've got lots of people who are tracking and wanting to benefit from the decisions that are made, but we need to do more work to encourage people to actually contribute and add value to the creation of the document.
Take some notes. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that was one of the things I guess that was the next thing was the roadmap. So I haven't really kept track of any changes lately, although I think I see emails and Slack messages fly past, and I haven't noticed any lately. Like the last I looked at it, I thought the status was pretty good as sort of a statement. I mean, it's kind of in the spirit of RFEs, which are like forever evolving. Like they're called RFEs, like requests. I always viewed them as that implies that they are never done. Like, are you kind of happy with the state of it, or you think it's got a lot more?
It's really only just started. Um, we've, I think we've got a reasonable coverage of the basic challenges in the space. So that section of the document is covering off, a significant number of sizable problems. But the next step really is to move into expanding on those to start to look at how we can really address some of these things. Let me just share the document so we can actually see it. So the first sections, we could tweak some of the wording, but it's mostly there. I think the challenges table is now, although not completely comprehensive, is certainly touching on all the key areas where there are significant issues. So, there are more problems listed in this table today than we could hope to solve in this year in any case. So that's a good starting point. What we've got now is this technology requirements section, which is just listing the issues, the high level topics from the challenge table. And ideally what we need to do is expand on each of these to start to consider how we might apply technology to addressing each of the challenges. And then that gives you the position on the roadmap. So it then shows you, whether we've got an existing technology that is already addressing this point and it just needs refinement, or whether we've got a gap in technology where we need to evolve what we're doing to address those problems, or where we actually know there's a problem but we don't even understand what the problem is yet. So this is usually a table and some narrative to really clarify how we think we need to be progressing in particular areas. And then off the back of that, you would then revise the potential solutions table to give you a clearer view of, where there's actual activity and where there are gaps and where there are unknowns. So right now we've obviously got a lot of unknowns, and some significant areas where a lot of work needs to be done. So this then gives people a feel for where there are opportunities in the space, and where there's work that could be contributed. So hopefully, as a result of this, it'd be much easier for people to come in and say, oh, okay, there's a problem that I'm interested in, and there's obviously a gap in this area, so it's worth starting up a project or taking our project and redirecting it to.
And how how sort of people, how is that sort of being farmed out to people to appeal for
Well,
input, I
typically
guess?
what will happen is that once you've set out the roadmap, people will start to incorporate that into their own strategies.
Hmm.
So it starts to give people a better view of what the marketplace looks like in terms of demand and supply. Um, and you'll naturally get people seeking to fill the gaps because there are commercial opportunities in those spaces.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a few of these in here. I look at it and they're things I relate to. It's like, yeah, I should be doing that, but I'm not. But I know how to do it. Um,
Yeah,
so I guess one of the other things I had on the agenda that just popped up this week, I was talking to a guy called David Aronchik. I think I'm saying his name incorrectly. He's from Microsoft. He's the creator of Kubeflow,
yeah. I
I
had a
believe.
chat with him yesterday.
Oh, you did. You caught up with him. Good. Did he?
Yeah,
Has he seen this? I pointed him to the various pages and stuff, but I don't know if I pointed him specifically to the roadmap.
yeah. He said he hadn't seen the roadmap, so I also encouraged him to take a look and then get involved.
Because
So
a lot of what he was saying was very much in line with what you say. Um, he's taking probably a different sort of implementation tacked around sort of metadata of pipelines, and especially around notebooks, and that's kind of that first item in that list about the challenge of data science teams regarding the risks of trying to use Jupyter notebooks
yeah,
and so on in production. And you mentioned what you've seen them do at Netflix and Uber and other places is using NBDev to extract that, usually from a Jenkins server. Like his comment is that most of these sort of MLOps pipelines are done through Jenkins, extract the exported functions out, and then treat it as normal Python code. I wasn't sure whether that's viewed as a workaround or if that's the state of the art. Like, what's the role of Jupyter notebooks in general?
I think the challenge has been that a lot of data science teams have evolved independently from the software engineering teams that they're intending to interface with. So, in my experience, most of the teams are made up of sort of maths graduates and people with a strong data focus,
Mm-hmm.
and with a limited exposure to software engineering best practice. So many of the techniques that are currently being used in that space have been evolved almost in complete isolation from the rest of the software world. And in many cases, they don't actually address problems that we're all too familiar with in managing software assets. So you have this interesting situation where you've got a niche which is very mature in terms of its ability to do machine learning work, but at the same time um, quite naive in many aspects of managing the assets that are being created as a result of that work. And because up until recently, most of the projects have been, first time around, people haven't been hitting a lot of those asset management problems because those types of issues only start to really become clear as you try and manage, the portfolio that you're creating over time. So I think the pain points are only just starting to make themselves visible in this space. But there has been quite a lot of momentum in terms of people doing things in the same way that they learn them. So Jupyter notebooks are a great training aid, and there's been no system of education to show how you need to transition off that training aid onto a different level of functionality when you move into production environments. So you know, a big chunk of the roadmap is probably just going to be about realigning those two disciplines so that the focus goes back onto product development rather than technology
I guess,
specific.
yeah, I guess it's like, do we take a position that strong? You know, I was doing some work this week. I wasn't using notebooks, but there were times, part of the nature of working with data. I'm not a data scientist, of course, but I'm able to emulate some of the things they do with different tools, enough for my purposes. And I found myself sort of taking notes in comments in source code. And then it made me think, well, a Jupyter notebook is kind of literate programming in a way, like the Don Knuth literate programming inversion of comments and code, where comments are first close and code is sort of put in boxes, whereas in normal source code, it's the other way around. Like, if Jupyter notebooks were managed, like if you had some setup where Jupyter notebooks were managed as a proper asset where changes were versioned and tracked, and pressing the different buttons actually interacted with an SCM system in a way that you didn't really escape, are they a valid artifact for some organizations to use? Like, are there some cases where it's valid? Are they as a development tool, or do you view them more as an IDE, and then, like, as you persist it, does it go through a tool like NVDev to the source control system? I'm just trying to think what role they have at all in this sort of future, because they are everywhere. Like, it's, you look at, there's so many tools I've looked at that I would never think of using notebooks to do it, but there's a notebook that explains it. It's you know, I was looking at one today and I was finding snippets of how to do things with some Python library from it, and you know, it was, I guess it's documentation in that case, but like, are they an artifact themselves and they have to be managed as such, or are they like, what is their role in the future? I guess this is a matter of opinion, so it can't really just be us.
I think there are probably several scenarios that we'll see. So in some organizations, the problem will be large enough that you will have people who are dedicated purely to managing a single model.
Mm-hmm.
And their focus will be entirely machine learning based. And so for them, you might argue that you take the tool that they're used to using and you extend it so that its features become more like an IDE.
Mm-hmm.
But for the majority of projects, what's happening is that the basic machine learning platforms and techniques that are out there are simplifying the process of applying machine learning to the point that it just becomes, you know, another feature that you're adding to a product.
That's how I am using it.
Yeah.
Myself.
And so really what you're talking about is having a product team which, you know, is going to have some user experience people. It's going to have some, you know, client side activities, some server side activities, some data management, some security, and some modeling. And those things very much overlap in terms of, you know, who's responsible for doing them. So, you know, you're typically going to see people who are going to be responsible for creating a model and then wrapping that model up and turning it into a production service that they then deploy in a DevOps environment. So they then need to be building not just the model, but also all of the service-related code that sits around it. And so the scope of their needs is much, much broader, and they need, if you like, tooling that supports all of their requirements rather than just the machine learning ones. So at that point, it makes much more sense to be using a product-centric tool rather than a domain-centric tool.
Right.
So that you can do the machine learning stuff that you want to do inside the tool that already does all the other stuff you need to do.
Right. So yeah. So the way I tried to capture some of that in some words. It's good it's being recorded anyway. So in the case of sort of the more general product team, so you don't have someone that's essentially dedicated to maintaining and curating a single model, which could well be the case in a large org, in which case they would probably treat notebooks as a first-class asset. But for other ones, you've got a product teams where people are sort of moving through different parts of the application code. They're sort of within their rights that when they come across some ML and data handling piece, that they don't suddenly switch to a different mode or a different tool just for that. Like just like when you're going from some backend Java code to CSS and JavaScript, if you're a full stack web developer, as people like to be called, you don't suddenly change modality to literate programming or some foreign thing. It would just, in what you're saying is that they would be using tools that are less of a barrier to them. There might still be some strange usage of APIs. Like, for example, I use pandas to balance data and get, do statistical things just to poke around a little bit. But it's really only a few lines of code. It's like you don't have to be an expert in it. I could do that in a notebook, but that didn't seem to make sense. I guess where it's the difference. I'm still exploring this myself, but the difference is there's this phase where I'm exploring the data, and then I have data-heavy tools and consoles, and I have little charts and histograms and things that I take that data with my domain knowledge, and then I sort of codify that into what is really actually not that many lines of code. But though that not many lines of code is the result of me looking at these things and going, yeah, well, actually that value is rarely ever that. That's an outlier. And I could see a notebook being a useful sort of record of how you got there. In that case, it's more documentation. I wasn't using any of those tools to visualize. I was using something from Google and just printing out stuff from the command line. But I could imagine people liking that visceral visual sort of notebook thing. But yeah, I see what you're saying. That's how I'd view it anyway. If I was going through a code base and suddenly I came across an IPNB file and opened it up in GitHub or whatever, I'd be like, what is this?
So I think it's actually easier to understand if you step out of the development model and look at this from a commercial perspective. So if you think about what you're doing as being part of developing a product, where that product is actually represented by some form of intellectual property, and that intellectual property is an asset that has to be built and maintained and distributed to customers, then a lot of the challenges are actually around reducing time to market and reducing the overall cost of ownership of this asset. maximizing return on value. So if all you're doing is building a single product and distributing it to a small number of customers, then it kind of doesn't matter how you do it. But as soon as you start to build scalable digital solutions that are going out to millions of customers, or are being used in regulated industries, or in mission critical tasks, the cost of owning and maintaining those things and distributing them accurately and safely massively outweighs the cost of, say, developing the machine learning component within the solution, even if that machine learning component is the core of the functionality. You end up spending most of your effort actually just trying to make the thing safe and robust and easily distributed.
When you say the thing, what do you mean? Like,
what we're talking about here is a product. So that product is going to be,
well, a product can be a service that's hosted as well.
So a SaaS service that's being consumed by multiple customers. In that case, your key functions are all being exposed by a service API that you need to manage. And all of your assets have potential vulnerabilities, so you need to be constantly scanning them and updating them for managing your security risk. But you may also be dealing with things that are more like white box products. So in many cases, the machine learning products are the tools that need to run against somebody else's data. So in those circumstances, you typically won't be able to deploy them as a SaaS service on your infrastructure, because the customer doesn't want to connect their database to your infrastructure. So instead, what you have to do is provide them with typically some sort of containerized or virtualized solution.
Yeah, but they're not necessarily taking delivery. Like, say, if you built that from Jupyter Notebooks, they're not taking delivery of those Jupyter Notebooks, are they?
Well, this is the problem, is that right at the moment, there are many instances where people are trying to use Jupyter Notebooks as a distribution mechanism for their model. And of course, under those circumstances, what you're actually doing is handing over all of your IP.
Right, yeah. It's the source code rather than the data plus the notebooks is the source code.
So
training data.
You need a mechanism by which you can defend your IP, protect the model, but at the same time distribute the solution to customers. And obviously, one of the big challenges with a model is that if you were able to build a model of a problem, somebody else can use your model as a black box to create their own model that works just as well. So there are a number of challenges in actually defending.
I guess to go back to the notebooks thing, it's like that. It's not that they're a problem per se; it's how they're used. If you view them as an IDE, at least, then that's not necessarily inherent evil. It's all of the other stuff that goes with it that might be a problem.
So I mean, they're really a rapid application development tool. So they're a RAD tool in the sense of something like Visual Basic, where make it very, very simple to experiment with something, but that simplicity comes at the cost of trading off all of the long-term asset management capabilities that you typically need when what you're building is a product.
So that So what I've heard is people use tools like NBDev they must have guardrails in place for because they are big enough to have that separation of concerns with data science. people, and those guardrails ensure that they extract stuff as part of the CI pipeline out of the notebooks. But I guess that they're, an elite minority, probably. I'd put it that way.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
so you really all we're looking at is gaps in the tooling requirements.
Hmm.
So we there are new ways of working that have been introduced by machine learning, which change the 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 types of information that people need to work with. And there's been an early evolution of one tool that makes it easier to work with some of those sets of data, but that tool actually lacks all of the other features that you would typically need to manage software assets. So
Yeah.
the medium to long term position is that Jupyter notebooks will probably go extinct as they're replaced by other IDE tools, which just add those capabilities to existing, software asset management tooling.
Yeah, I didn't really want to go for a full hour today, just to sort of start off. So I guess the last thing was, and we've sort of been talking about this offline, was more test coverage for Jenkins X and ML quick starts, and I believe there'll be work underway soon to hopefully cover that with BDD and using Google infrastructure. So
Yeah, I've had some
test
conversations
that.
already on that one, so I think
Yeah,
that's being
that
resourced
should
this
be.
week.
Yeah, so that'll be good too. And I know there's a lot of other things around versioning that need to go on that are bigger problems, but I think having that sort of grander end-to-end tests in place will be good. Of course, there's unit tests in place, which is always good. Like someone said, it's always good to do testing. So yeah, I'm happy with that. That'll be good. And Kara hasn't been able to join. Problems with her Zoom client. Yeah, she was trying to use it through the web, like officially our org and some others aren't meant to be using Zoom, but people do anyway. It's okay, this isn't being recorded. I guess for security reasons, but it's what the CDF uses, so I think it's fine.
For
So,
public
yeah,
meetings, which are being
which are
recorded for
public
open,
anyway. That's
yeah,
right.
there are no problems.
Yeah, absolutely no problem. So, yeah, so I've taken some notes. I use the same document. So I guess the next things to do for next time is to get the calendar set up, and if this time works for you, it's a little bit odd. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll need to think of another time. I was thinking there's some contacts I have in New Zealand that work in this space. This might not be the best time for them because they're 2 hours ahead. I'll check in with them, so maybe we could juggle some times around a bit. I don't know. And what that means, we'll have some other people on this side of the world anyway. But that, I guess that'll be another action item.
Yeah, and my understanding is that the CDF is going to do something of a communications push on MLOps shortly. So we should probably put together some articles to help support that, and then use that as an opportunity to encourage more people to contribute.
Just taking that note down. Yeah, no, that makes sense as well. Like some of the positions that you stated would be good sort of content for blogs to get eyeballs. And because I think, if there is going to be a more mainstream push for more people doing ML apps, becomes a bit less mysterious. My sort of personal angle is I believe there'll be more developers doing this, and which I believe is complementary to your sort of opinion, which is how do we get the data science people on the same rails that we've built. I think it's totally complementary. But yeah, my personal view is that as well, I think developers can do a lot more of what would have once been considered data science, just like DBAs are a specialty, but often developers pick up tasks there and consult with DBAs. That could be a possible future for data science as well.
Yeah. So what we've done in this session is effectively what we need to do for each of these sections. So we've taken one item from the list of technology.
Yeah, and drilled into it.
And now we need to write that up and put it into the document, and then get people to review and amend that, and then agree it, and then move on to the next piece.
Right. So okay, that's an action item, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm happy to write up this session, and
tag me on it, or I guess I see all pull requests, but
yeah.
yeah.
I'll try and cover this off in the second session, so we get some input from other people in there as well.
Yeah. And I guess next time we can sort of work our way down the list, because it seems to follow on, and they're things I can relate to and challenges I'm having right now. So that's good timing. So, all right. Well, I guess we can wrap it up for today. And it's a shame couldn't be joined by Kara, but next time. And there might even be some other people. If this time works, we can keep it, and there might be other people in Europe that even join, which means it's not really an APAC thing, but maybe we don't need to be too fussy with names. But I'll work on growing the APAC presence. So, all right. Till next time.
Thank you, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.